next speaker. So Sven Gentner is the head of unit for corporate reporting, audit and credit rating agencies in the European Commission's Directorate General for Financial Stability, Financial Services and Capital Markets Union. With nearly 20 years of experience in the Commission, he will share his insights on current developments from a standards and regulatory perspective, as well as talk about timelines, which will be of interest, I think, to all attendees here today. So a good portion of this session is dedicated to Q&A. We're really grateful for Sven for traveling over for this event. So I would strongly encourage all of you, both in the room and indeed online, while we have Sven here, to ask any questions that you have relating to reporting and assurance standards, or indeed anything else relating to the EU and all that's going on there that come to mind. So with that, I'll invite Sven. Sven, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin, for the kind introduction. Hello, good morning. It's very nice to be back in Dublin. I will try to be brief in the beginning to leave time for Q&A. So as Kevin said, I'll try and give you an overview on where we are, in particular on sustainability reporting at the EU level. I think most of the content has already been explained by the two previous speakers. Obviously, the focus at the moment is on the implementation of the CSRD and the start of the ESRS, but maybe I take a step back before I get into that, because really what we're trying to do with the CSRD and ESRS is part of a bigger picture, and this bigger picture, of course, is that we're trying to mobilize financial markets to help with the green transition that we're doing in Europe, that we're doing, I guess, also here. That is a topic everywhere. In our view, financial markets do need to play an important role in that transition. I mean, governments alone cannot do this. The volumes of investments that are needed over the next few years are enormous. We need everyone to contribute to this. And the approach that we've taken in terms of sustainable finance is really fairly simple. We need more transparency, we need better data, we need better reporting, so that investors have a better picture of actually where companies are going, and that in the end, investment decisions are different from what they were before. And in the end, that company behavior will be different from what it was before. We've put in place already quite a lot of things, about the taxonomy, probably about the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. And now, if you want the final piece of this puzzle, we hope, is the CSRD and the ESRS, which will ensure that corporates will provide all the information into financial markets that are really needed to improve the flow of information and to improve the decisions, and in the end, of course, have an effect on the behavior of companies. So as was explained before, the Commission adopted the ESRS as a delegated act end of July. There's a so-called scrutiny period now, which means that the European Parliament and the Council can look at them, and if they would really not like what we've done, they could reject them. There's actually a vote scheduled tomorrow in the Parliament, which was initiated by a number of MEPs, but we think it's unlikely to go through because it's really a small number of MEPs, and we do hope that by next week, the scrutiny period will end, and by then the ESRS will really become law and will be published in the official journal in December. But as was said also before, I mean, the Commission is trying to take, if you want, a proportionate approach on this. On the one hand, we think it is absolutely necessary to put these rules in place because we think they have the potential to help companies. They have the potential to unify, to make the reporting more coherent, also more reliable. But at the same time, of course, we do understand that they impose a burden on companies and that it's not easy to deal with all these new requirements coming in. We're dealing with E, we're dealing with S, we're dealing with G, we're dealing with double materiality. It's a lot of new things coming in. So what we've tried to do is, on the one hand, we've, if you want, reduced them a bit in the level of ambition. It was already explained, there is more phase-in, we've done full materiality, there's certain rules for companies below 750 employees to ease all of that. We're also working now with EFRAG to provide further guidance on these standards because we've really received a lot of questions around the concrete implementation. So EFRAG at the moment is preparing guidance on both materiality and value chain. EFRAG is also setting up, if you want, some kind of contact point where everyone can turn and hand in questions, which would then be answered either by EFRAG if they're of a more technical nature, or it would be the European Commission itself that would answer them if we feel they are of a broader, say, more legal concern as well. We also continue to work with the ISSB and other international organizations because we understand that lots of companies are, of course, interested that the two standards fit together. I think we've done a lot of good work, and I'm actually very happy about the cooperation that we've had with the ISB, well, the ISSB in that sense, because they really did commit to work with us, and we made changes on our side, they made changes on their side. And I think on the topic that we both cover, which is climate, we've really managed to get to a very good level of alignment, and we want to continue that kind of work going forward. The next step, I think, will be working on a digital taxonomy, which we're going to do for the ESRS, which we think is also important that it then fits together with what the ISSB is going to do in that respect. Maybe a few more words also in terms of this proportionality approach or the things we're doing about regulatory burden. Commission President von der Leyen has announced that we're going to try and reduce reporting burdens overall by 25%. So these efforts that we've done on ESRS are part of this already, but we're also going to adopt, and I think it's going to go through the College of Commissioners today, a package which is going to deal with further issues. So first of all, we're going to delay the sectoral standards, or we're going to propose to delay the sectoral standards under the CSRD by 2 years, because we think this will give companies more time and time that is needed. And it will also give EFRAG more time to prepare these sectoral standards. The CSRD had foreseen that we should adopt these standards already or start adopting them by the summer of next year. And I think we should wait at least until 2026, really to give preparers more time to deal with the first wave if you want. What we're also going to do is we're going to increase the thresholds under the accounting directive. So that means in terms of turnover and balance sheet size, we're going to go up by 25%, which will mean for a number of companies, of course, that they will fall out from the reporting requirements also under the CSRD. And we think this is justified because we've seen a lot of inflation over the last few years, and it will again reduce the burden on the companies. Maybe the last thing that I will mention is the link to the assurance standards, because I mean it's been clear already from the previous presentation. There's a big assurance audit element also under the CSRD. We'll start with limited assurance and move to reasonable assurance once the Commission thinks it's time, and we adopt delegated acts also on this. The approach that we're taking is we're working very closely with the IAASB at the moment. They're running their consultation, as you know, on ISA 5000. We think it would make a lot of sense for us to base ourselves as far as possible on the work done at international level, the same logic as with working with the ISSB. We'll see next year where the IAASB is really going to end up and how far we can use what they do. We will probably have to go further in a number of areas, because if you want, what is required under ESRS is more detailed, is more clear in terms of what you really have to do as reporting. And probably in that sense also the auditing standards might have to be a little bit more detailed than what the IAASB is preparing. But as I said, we'll try and base ourselves on that as far as possible. And we think we're probably going to adopt our standards in 2025 if everything goes according to plan. And that will then, I think, also help in terms of the overall audit approach. So once more, a lot of stuff happening. We hope that most of the pieces of the puzzle will be in place very soon. We know that this is a challenge, and we will try very hard together with EFRAG and others to support and accompany this process. And I'm pretty sure it will keep us busy for the few years to come, because, as I said, there is more coming down the line. And I think there'll probably also be the need at some point to adjust and to see how well all of this is working. And the Commission, as always, is going to monitor this. We're actually legally required to do a review after 3 years. But I think already before, together with EFRAG and others, we'll very closely follow how this is going to work on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great, Sven. And once again, thanks very much for taking time out of your busy agenda to join us today. Just interested in your opening remarks around a vote that you hope will be lost in the Parliament, if you can say that. I suppose that's indicative of perhaps maybe some of the changing political tides. I mean, what's your view on, even looking to the future, how that political sort of tide might impact on the future development and plans?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is very clear that the if you want, political mood has changed a lot over the last 2 or 3 years. But I think we're seeing two elements at the same time. On the one hand, the commitment to the whole green transition to sustainable finance is still there and has to be there because the real world problems that we're dealing with haven't really gone away. I remember I was on holiday here last year in Ireland, and there was a heat wave, and people were cycling with umbrellas to protect themselves from the sun, and the landlady where we stayed refused to let her dog out during the day because she said it was too hot and it might die in the sun and all that. So I mean, that's the kind of thing which we're dealing with, I think, all over Europe and beyond. So I mean, these real world problems haven't gone away, and I think the commitment to do something about them also hasn't gone away. But of course, what has changed over the last few years is that we've seen an energy crisis, the war in Ukraine, inflation, overall concerns around competitiveness, China, issues like that. And of course, it's being reflected also in the policy approach. And I think this is why, as I said, the Commission is taking this approach to say we need to go forward with this. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that we do everything we can to make it proportionate, to help with the implementation, and probably also to be realistic in terms of what can be achieved. Now, how exactly things are going to play out in the next Commission is difficult to say. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised also if we would see another swing of the pendulum at some point, depending on how the economic situation is evolving, depending also what we're going to see in terms of sustainability developments. But I think the commitment is there anyway.
Okay. And just maybe to expand that point a bit, I mean, there are European parliamentary elections coming up. I mean, do you think this is going to be an element of those sort of debates as they come along?
Yes. No. I mean, this has been a big issue in the Parliament in particular, but also in the Council over the last year or a year and a half or so, because, as I said, there is a lot of concern in terms of how companies can deal with this. Does it affect the overall competitiveness of the European economy? How does it what does it do to our companies relative to others? And it is something that we're trying to address in various ways, and I'm pretty sure that will also feature in the election campaign, and I think rightfully so, because I mean that's a democratic process, and that's also what should influence then the policy making at European level.
Okay. You mentioned sectoral standards, and I suppose the ambitions that were there at the start, and perhaps taking a bit of a pause. Could you maybe talk about those a little bit more for people who mightn't have an awareness of them? Sort of what was the ambition, and sort of where we're at now in terms of current thinking?
Yeah. So the approach taken in the CSRD was that the first set we adopted, and this is the one that we adopted in July, really covers everything. It covers environmental, social, and governance issues. It covers all sectors, if you want, and I think it's already a very solid basis on which to report in terms of sustainability. But then in the CSRD, there's also a requirement to go beyond that and develop standards for specific sectors, which I think can do two things. The one is maybe go a little bit further if there is a need in terms of the reporting, but they can also explain better, or in a sense adapt the general standards to that sector and the circumstances under which that sector operates. Now, and as I said, in the CSRD, it was originally foreseen that the Commission should start adopting these standards by 2024, which we think in retrospect now is too early. Well, first of all, as you said, there'll be an election, and we can hardly adopt standards between the election and the new Commission coming in and all of that. So practically speaking, it would be very difficult. But then also in terms of the timing, we think it's just too early, and it would place too much of a burden on companies. And it would also be, frankly, too difficult for EFRAG to do this, because they typically need a year or a year and a half to develop all of this. So that's why we're proposing now, and that's actually a change of the CSRD itself, to delay this by 2 years, so start in 2026. And then we'll still also have to see which sectors we're going to start with. It's probably going to be stuff around maybe energy, oil, gas, but also the financial sector, because there is issues in terms of financed emissions and other issues, I think, where it would be useful to give further clarification. And of course, there's also, I should mention, this work still going on SME standards, which is we're not going to delay, but we think is very important too. Under the CSRD, there is a requirement to develop standards for listed SMEs, which fall within the scope of the CSRD. But we get a lot of requests also from non-listed SMEs, because of course they say, well, we're being asked or we're being requested to report on sustainability anyway if we're in the value chain of a larger company. We don't really have a standard on which to base this. We're very concerned that some of the companies ask actually more than we think is useful, or companies ask us different things. So they would actually like to have a standard as well under which to report. And the Commission is planning to adopt a standard on a voluntary basis, but also based on preparatory work by EFRAG. And that will probably happen in 2025.
Okay. I'm aware that there was, I think, at least one draft sector-specific standard. I think there was one on oil and gas.
Yes.
Is that scrapped now, or is that going to form the basis, and the standards that are out there going to form the basis of ongoing work?
No, it's not scrapped. It's just that it will give EFRAG more time to prepare this. So from what I understand is that they're looking at doing some kind of field testing next year with preparers, but maybe also, and then also users, I think, in a second stage. They're also going to do a public consultation, but it will just give them more time to prepare this properly, but they will nevertheless use what they've prepared already so far.
Okay, very good. You talked there about the assurance standard and where we are in relation to that. IAASB, as you said, have their standard out at the moment. I mean, what's your sense really in terms of, I mean, the timeline is going to be tight around that if you think about when auditors are going to have to start using them. Do you have a sense at this stage whether what the Commission will do will be pretty close to what the IAASB do, and do you think the timelines will work in terms of being there for the audit profession to be able to use them?
Yeah, so I don't think we'll be able to have something in place for the first round of audits, given the timeline of the IAASB, but also in terms of what we have to do. So if I understand correctly, the IAASB wants to finalize its work and put something out by the second half of next year, towards the end of next year. As I said, we will then probably have to do some work ourselves, given that we might have to go further in certain areas in terms of the requirements. We then have to go through a whole process in terms of what we call a delegated act, which is a technical piece of law. So that will probably take us towards the second half of 2025, or maybe even a little bit later. So that means that it is, for the first round at least, I think it will be too late. But okay, nevertheless, I think there's a pretty good understanding already in terms of the basics, what needs to be done, and we're then going to try and, help this further with the standard. We're also talking to the CAOB whether maybe in between something can be done in terms of, interim guidance, or at least some kind of help and support, but we'll have to see. I mean, what we want to avoid is that we'll have, 3 different rounds of guidance and standards and all that, because that's not necessarily going to help the profession either. So we'll do it, in a pragmatic way, let's put it like that.
And I mean, you talk about 3 different standards, as in iteratively. I mean, the other possibility is you could have 27 different standards, at least on a temporary basis. Is that something that the Commission is thinking about and working towards minimizing?
Yeah. No, sure. I mean, obviously, we would like to avoid that. And we do hope that everyone will try and work together through the various fora that are there, also to make sure that we don't kind of digress too much. But I mean, the timeline is not easy, because I mean, very frankly, if we now did some kind of, interim standard and then did another one once the IAASB has finished its work, and then probably do yet another one once we move to reasonable assurance, I don't think that that'll be very helpful either. So again, what we're looking at, I mean, we're trying to base ourselves on the IAASB, which will be out by the end of next year anyway, and which might also inform companies' behavior or auditors' behavior anyway. Then we'll come in, and then again, under the CSRD, we're required to look at the results and the whole process and see at what is the right moment to move to reasonable assurance.
Okay.
Which will be, much further down the line probably.
Yes. And the other thing you mentioned then was probably the inevitable need for further guidance because of the specific requirements within the EU that extend sort of well beyond, international sustainability standards. You mentioned the CAOB. Is that something you think that that committee of European Audit Oversight Bodies?
Yes.
Is that something you think that committee might have a role in assisting the Commission as well?
Sure, definitely. Yeah. No. I mean, we do work with them very closely. Also now during this consultation phase of the IAASB, and definitely they'll have a role also going forward on this.
Okay, very good. I have a couple more questions, but hopefully everybody in the room is getting themselves ready to ask a few questions of Sven while he's here and indeed online. You mentioned there the reducing complexity, the 25% reduction in the burden, and you talked about a couple of different methods there. One obviously are the relaxations that have been done in relation to CSRD, and then there's the increase in the reporting thresholds, or the accounting directive threshold, should I say, for so that will take a number of companies out. Are there anything else? Were there any other things that were considered, or are there any other things that might be in train to reduce the burden on businesses who might necessarily benefit from those specific relaxations?
Yeah. So in terms of CSRD and ESRS, this is the package for the time being. There are other areas as well. I mean, in terms of also, I don't know, reporting to oversight bodies, market reporting, other kinds of things, which different parts of the Commission are looking at the moment. Okay. And in the package that is going to be adopted today, there is more, but that doesn't directly concern sustainability reporting. It concerns other types of reporting. And then this is in any case not the last step of this process, because I mean, it was announced in the spring. The Commission has now been working on this internally, various departments putting together this package, but the work will continue also into the next year, and then most likely also into the next Commission. And there might be additional rounds of trying to ease the burden. I mean, there's certain consultations running at the moment also by other departments, which are asking stakeholders about views in terms of how burden can be reduced further. So it's not a one-off. I think it's to be understood as a process that should lead in the end to this overall reduction that was announced.
Okay, very good. I'm sure many people in the room are looking forward to that. A number of years ago, I suppose, before CSRD came along and overtook us all, the Commission began its work in looking at the current audit directive and looking at whether it was perhaps time for review. And then we had, for example, Wirecard came along, and then there were further Commission reviews in relation to that. And at the time, I recall that the consultation looked at corporate reporting, it looked at auditing, it looked at regulation of corporate reporting, it looked at corporate governance. And there was the results of that came through, and then CSRD came along. So I'm just wondering, where is the Commission now in relation to looking at potential revisions to the original audit directive, and indeed some of the other things that came out of that consultation process?
Yeah. So what our commissioners said last year is that she thinks we simply don't have enough time left in this commission or in this mandate, also this parliament, to come with a new initiative. I mean, first of all, because there is only now half a year, or last year there was 1 year left, but also because there was so much other stuff on the table, all the issues that I've mentioned already, and there is in the end also a limited capability or capacity of the Parliament and the Council to usefully deal with this, and on the Commission side as well. And that's why we've said we'll take a bit more time still. We'll take this into the next Commission. We're still studying the issues that you mentioned. I mean, we also think of it in terms of corporate governance, statutory audit, but then also audit oversight and supervision, which we think in all three areas we need to look at issues again and see how it's played out since the last reform. And then I think in the next Commission we'll see what kind of package we could usefully put together to improve things. I think the issues being discussed haven't changed an awful lot since before. I mean, it's the whole question of concentration and quality and oversight, and then also the link to the structures within companies. We'll really have to see what we can do usefully to improve this.
And just then, if we're trying to think of a timeline for that, so you're probably beginning at the next Commission, and it'll be a number of years, I suppose, before we see legislative change coming through.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, if the next Commission decides to do something about it, I would think the earliest would be, I don't know, towards the end of 2025, something like that, for a proposal to come out.
Yeah, and then
negotiations and all of that. Yeah, okay. But really, this is for the next commission to decide. What we're trying to do is do all the preparatory work. As you said, we've done lots of studies. We're just in the process of doing another study in terms of on the corporate governance side. The CAOB is preparing the market monitoring, which the Commission will issue then. And we're also getting a lot of input, as you can imagine, from lots of different stakeholders who are giving us their ideas and so on. We're trying to put all of this together.
Okay, very busy. I'll open it up to the room. Anybody here who has any questions? We'll also obviously take questions on Slido as well. But first of all, I'll just ask if anybody in the room has any questions for Sven on anything that we've covered this morning. Yes.
Thanks, Kevin and Sven. Hear me? Yeah. Just wanted to ask you about the coordination with non-European areas, for example, the States, where typically we always have difficulty in reporting and reporting under two different jurisdictions. And we've all suffered greatly with accepted accounting practices. What is the level of coordination now in relation to sustainability reporting in terms of Europe and non-European continents, other continents?
Yeah, it's a very good question, which, I mean, we're very keen to coordinate here. First of all, because it's an international problem and it needs an international solution. We're not going to solve it on our own. But also, as you said, it's very important for companies not to be faced with lots of different reporting requirements in different parts of the world. We do have regular dialogues with the US, with Japan, with others. With the US, as you know, is not quite so easy at the moment because it's highly politicized in America. The SEC has been working on something around sustainability reporting now for a number of years. I think there was an interview with Gary Gensler last week in the FT where, again, he said, well, they're trying to finalize something. Their concern, of course, is that they know the moment they put something out, it will go to court in any case. And if they get it wrong, it'll be struck down. So I think they're really trying very hard to strike the balance to do something meaningful, but at the same time also be sure that afterwards it will not run into trouble legally or in the courts. We're talking to them regularly, but pretty much we get the same message that you also read in the newspaper, in the sense of we're working on it and we'll let you know when we finalize. So, which I understand, but of course it's a bit frustrating for us as well, because it would be much better if we could really kind of work on something and try and make sure that it really fits together. But okay, that's where we are. As I said, what we've done over the last year or so, we've worked a lot with the IAASA, but also GRI and others, and I think that has been very productive and very helpful. Here on the sustainability side, we take a different approach from the financial reporting side, because not on the financial reporting side, we basically do what the IASB prepares and then implement it into European law. While on the sustainability side, we thought that's not possible. We have a wider mandate. We cover many more areas. We take full double materiality. We have a very ambitious overall Green Deal approach. So it's a bit of a different relationship. It took a bit of time, I think, for both sides to understand how to deal with it. But now I must say, it works really well. And the IASB is very committed to this. We are very committed to this. And maybe also through this work, we can lay the foundation then for the, say, bilateral cooperations that we'll see in future. But yes, it's high up on our agenda. But it also, of course, depends on the other side, how prepared or how ready they are to engage in that kind of dialogue.
Thank you. One at the front and then one over here. Just hold on for that. Thank you.
Just to maybe continue the question behind, thank you both, first of all. I saw yesterday the UK withdrew the reporting changes that were going to have a fundamental impact on businesses that had listings in the UK, obviously. I just wondered your thoughts on the UK and the bifurcation of the UK out of the EU. You know, it's what is the view from Brussels as we see two regimes going in different ways? Now they may be rowing back, but you know, it's an important issue for many of us here.
Sure, I understand now. I hope you don't want me to comment on Brexit in general, but so we'll be here for the rest of the day. Whatever. No. Well, obviously it's a new kind of challenge. Before we were in one political legal sphere. Now we're not anymore. Now for quite a while, we couldn't really engage very much with the UK because there was a policy that as long as we don't have a framework in place, we can't engage on individual topics. That has changed now since last year with the Windsor framework, and we've now got a bit of a framework also in the financial markets and financial services area. But nevertheless, of course, all these questions arise now. I mean, where are they going to go in terms of sustainability reporting? Where will we end up? What are they going to do on, which is also in my remit, ESG rating agencies, where we've proposed some law. The UK has a code of conduct, and they're thinking about doing something on the legal side and all of that. So, well, it's yet another international jurisdiction now, which we have to deal with, and where of course, we have the two things which are important to us. On the one hand, I mean, we have our own approach, which we think makes sense, but at the same time, we also want to make sure, of course, that for business, there is no unnecessary friction, that we try and make sure that we talk to each other and bring things closer to each other where it's possible. But again, it also depends a lot on what the other side does. So to come back to the beginning, we do have contacts now, and we start talking about these kinds of things. And I hope that also in the sustainability sphere and sustainability reporting sphere, we'll come to a place where, I don't know, the things that they do and we do are not too far apart from each other. We're probably ahead of most other jurisdictions in that respect, because we do have a legal framework in place already, or we're putting the last touches in place, which I understand is challenging for companies, but I also think it might have the potential to be an advantage in a number of years. And we've seen this before. It's always hard to do this transition, and it's hard to do this adjustment, but I'm deeply convinced that everyone will have to do it anyway. And whether it will take them a bit longer and whether they take a different route first, in the end, we'll all get to a similar level. And sometimes if you go there first, and maybe also if your standards can be an inspiration for others, it might not be necessarily a disadvantage.
Okay, I think we've time for one more question from the room. Sorry, and conscious of time, but there was with Aidan.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Sven. Kevin, you probably stole most of my questions, but anyway, just two things really. I think we very much would welcome the initiative by the Commission in terms of the threshold adjustment in the accounting directives. But of course, that is a member state option. And so, you know, if it is to be implemented in an Irish context, I would encourage the department to do so as quickly as possible. I see Orla smiling. And just in terms of your comments on the assurance standard, so I think when you spoke yourself, you mentioned it being issued. And I mean, I'm taking by it the standard itself sometime in 2025. And then when Kevin probed you on the issue of an assurance standard, I wasn't quite sure who actually is going to finally issue that assurance standard. Is that the Commission? Is it the first time, therefore, that the Commission is dipping its toe into assurance standard setting? Where's the, without wanting to cause offence, is there sufficient competence and expertise within the Commission to engage in that kind of standard setting? And is it the door opening on ultimately the Commission getting involved in statutory audit standard setting in the future?
Yeah, so no, it is indeed the Commission that is foreseen under the CSRD as the body that will adopt the delegated act that will codify these standards. Now, I agree with you. We don't claim that we're the ones who should develop these standards. Just like EFRAG developed the reporting standards for us, we would like to base ourselves on outside expertise. As I said, that's why we're really looking very closely at what the IAASB does, and we engage with them very closely. We've also got a group of industry and regulators who we talk to, and where we try and kind of coordinate the EU position on that. And then, as I said, once the IAASB has finished its work, we'll also look at it. We'll look at it together with the CAOB, with others. Maybe there's additional work to be done, where again we would draw on the expertise of the oversight bodies of the CAOB and others. But then in the end, it is the Commission that adopts this delegated act. And I mean, we could do the same, I think, on the statutory audit side, which we haven't done so far. We have no plans, but okay, we'll have to see how things develop.
Okay. Apologies to our online attendees, but we're out of time here, unfortunately. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lisa now to take you through the next session, but join me in a round of applause for Sven. Thank you.